Hi everybody and welcome back to Crafted by Corie. If you're new, I'm Corie. Welcome to my channel, and if you're returning, thank you so much as always for being here. I really appreciate your support. I have brand new projects for you today, doing some Kirkland's dupes or inspired projects, and I hope you love them. Be sure to give me a big thumbs up, and if you haven't already subscribed, I hope you'll consider doing so. For now, let's go ahead and get right on into the crafting.
DIY number one. This is my inspiration picture. It was $36.99 at Kirkland's, and we are using some Dollar Tree Hot Wheels racetracks and then some wood ovals from the Hobby Lobby. I have a few odds and ends from my stash, a Dollar Tree glass candle holder, but I am basically marking where the two strips of the track are going to cross, and I'm cutting out little slits in the track so that it's going to kind of create a groove there so that we can kind of piece our tracks together at that cross point, if you will. So using my little X-Acto knife and cutting that out, and so you can see how I'm just kind of piecing it together there. So I'm going to bend my track from one end of my oval to the other, and I'm starting with the longer length first, using some hot glue to secure that. I'm just going to hold that there until it is cool enough for me to be able to let go of it without it popping off. And then I'm going to go ahead and bend it over, secure the other side the same way, and hold that again until it is cool enough for me to let it go. Then I'm going to go ahead with my other piece and bend it the opposite way. I'm trimming off the ends so that it will connect, because obviously this is not as wide as the other direction, so our little track piece doesn't need to be quite as long. So I'm securing that the same way that I did the first piece on either side of the oval, and making sure that that is nice and secure. I'm making sure that the little pieces of track are hitting flush with the tabletop so that everything is nice and aligned. And now I'm using the smaller oval that's going to be the top part of the lantern that we're creating. I'm using my staple gun to secure it to the wood. These are 3/4 inch staples, and I just want to make sure that this is nice and secure, so I am really giving it quite a few staples here, wherever I can connect them in. And then I did go back and reinforce that in the cracks and crevices with hot glue. Now I'm taking another set of tracks, and on this one I am cutting off that entire side strip so that it has no lip to it on that one edge. I'm going to keep the lip on the left side, but I'm going to remove it on the right side. So here you can kind of see how I'm just cutting along the edge where it is bent, where that corner is, where it bends up, and then just pulling that away once I've scored it enough. So the reason I'm doing that is I'm going to use that bottom lip to kind of hook underneath the wood round, and then the part that I cut away will be at the top. And I cut it into sections. I was thinking I would wrap it around the entire thing, but it was just getting too bulky where the straps were coming down along the wood. So I ended up just doing it in pieces. So I'm cutting these to fit, and I did that all the way around the lantern bottom, and I'm just using a good amount of hot glue there, and that actually also helped to heat up the plastic to help it form to the wood in that curved shape, if you will. So this is the last piece I'm putting down, and I did go back and just add a little bit more hot glue at each of the little joints, just a little dot at the corners to help that adhere. And I'm taking the other strip from that second 2-pack, and I'm trying to figure out how I want to wrap it around here. It did seem to work better putting it on the inside, so that is the way that I went. and just trimmed it down a little bit so that it was going to meet in the middle on the inside. And then I went ahead and used more hot glue to secure that down. This just takes a little bit of patience because you got to make sure you wait for the hot glue to cool completely before you can let go of it each time. I was using my level to make sure that I had my track at the same height, if you will, all the way around, so that when I was all done, it wouldn't look like my lantern was lopsided. So just using my little Dollar Tree level to help me out and make sure that I'm keeping everything straight. This is a little cabinet knob that I had left in my stash, and so I am hot gluing that to the top. This is going to fashion the top of our lantern, and this is just a wooden bead. I am using my Dremel little rotary tool to sand that down so that it will lay flat on the cabinet pole, drawer pole, whatever you want to call that. And then this that I just cut down is a keychain little fob that I got at the Dollar Tree in a pack of like 5 or 6. So I cut that with my heavy duty wire cutters and I popped that in for my little hook. So now I am taking this Dollar Tree bling ribbon, I'm going to call it. I wanted to do something that was going to help make the bottom look a little bit more cohesive. And so I wanted some sort of a ribbon that would provide texture. So I thought this actually might work really, really well to just give it a little bit of texture. So hot glued that down. I just used a little bit of glue because I didn't want the glue coming through and making blobs on this. I really wanted that texture to be pure, so to speak. Rust-Oleum, hammered metal, spray painted the whole thing. I was so happy with how this turned out, you guys. I hope you like it too. Popped my little candle in and there she is. Let me know what you think. DIY number 2. This is my inspiration, also from Kirkland's. It was $69.99 at Kirkland's. I am going to use paint sticks from the Home Depot. These used to be $1 for 3, a pack of 3. These are the 5-gallon paint sticks. But I noticed when I picked them up this last time that they were up to $1.50, so $1.49 for a pack of 3, which I still think is a pretty good deal. But I went ahead and sanded off those ruler markings, and now I've got my miter box out, and I am going to but cut it so that it is making a 90-degree angle at the top. So I'm going to do that on both sides of my paint stick. And I had preserved as much of the stick as I could, just making sure that I was removing the handle where it kind of curves in because I wanted my sticks to be straight. So I'm trying to find the center here because I need to cut the other one in half. I'm trying to make a cross shape here. So I need to make sure that I cut out, I think it's about a 1.5 inch or 1 3/4 inch square out of the middle of the paint sticks. So it will accommodate the other one and everything will be the same length. See there? And now I am figuring out with my cross how long I need to have my other paint sticks for my frame. So I went ahead and figured that out. I'm very visual if you haven't noticed that yet about me. So you'll always see me trying to look at it and see how I need to do it based on what I'm seeing, as opposed to necessarily always relying on math. I can do math, but for some reason I sometimes mess that up more, and I'm very good with the visual. So I cut off the handles for this last group and then I cut them in half. So now I'm positioning it. I've got it all kind of pieced together. I have not glued anything. I won't be gluing anything until I have all my pieces cut because I want to make sure that I've got all of my dimensions the way that I want them. And I decided I was going to go ahead and, do you call this beveling? Bevel the edges? I can't remember. Miter the edges? Maybe that's why it's a miter box. So at any rate, I am going to put these together this way, so now you can see what I was doing. And now I've got those laid on my cross, and I'm trying to figure out the third layer and trying to decide where I want the placement of everything. Now, because I'm using these paint sticks, the dimensions are different. These are wider than what was depicted in the inspiration picture. So mine's going to be a little bit different, but I'm still really happy with the way that it came out. So I figured out what size I needed, and I'm putting it together this way because of the little strips that are going to come off the end. So you see there where they're going to connect back to the sides of the frame. And I was trying to figure out the best way to fill in that gap, whether I needed to cut my paint strips at an angle again, but then I thought, all these little pieces I cut off, look at that. That last set that I had mitered, those little scraps were perfect for what I needed, and it was just going to make everything a little bit simplified. So now I'll be able to cut straight edges on those. So I just figured out how long I needed to make them, and then they're going to pop right in there. Now they're kind of dropping right now because I don't have things glued together, so it was all separating a little bit, but I was really, really happy with the way things were coming together here. Now it is time to glue. So I'm using my Gorilla wood glue, and I'm trying to get everything lined up. I did ultimately find that I needed a little bit extra support for this when I started putting in my crossbars. So those are not glued yet. I was just popping them in to make sure that everything was going to fit and everything was square. Came back with my staple gun to give this, like I said, a little bit more support at the corners. I went ahead and flipped that over because I want my staples to be at the back. I don't want them to be visible. And then I was ready to go ahead and start gluing my interior pieces in. So I'm popping in everything. For these, I just used hot glue for the diagonal crosses. I'm putting together the next layer now, and I did that with the wood glue, and then I did flip it over here, and I went ahead and reinforced it with the staples. These are 1/4-inch staples that I'm using for this. So I went ahead and added a little bit more of my wood glue just to give it some additional support, and filled in those little grooves, so to speak. Just used my finger to kind of mush it in there a little bit and smooth it out so I didn't have globs of paint on the back. And then my third layer, I went ahead and started putting that together as well. I supported that with staples too. And sorry for my big head getting in the way there, but so that was all good and ready to go. I did not attach the other little pieces to it until I had it in place. So now I'm taking my antique wax with a baby wipe, and I'm just going to go ahead and give some of these pieces a coat. I made sure that I got into all the little nooks and crannies, and I actually did end up doing the back of this as well. If you follow me, I just like everything to be kind of nice and finished. So once that was done, I set it aside to dry. I took my third layer, and I'm going to go ahead and give this a coat of the antique wax as well. I applied that to front and back, and I also did all those little pieces that are going to be attached to this layer, so to speak. So did all those little pieces and set those aside to dry. Now that middle piece, I went ahead and I used the same technique, but with my Adirondack white chalk paint. And so I've got this baby wipe, picking up some of the paint, and I just kept going over it until it had the whitewash effect that I wanted, and with the density or saturation that I was looking for. So I just kept going over that, and I did the back of that as well. Once everything was dry, it was ready to put all of my pieces together. So I have not glued these down yet. Again, I'm just double checking everything, making sure everything is going to fit and going in the way that I want it, so that if I have to make any adjustments, I can do that before I've applied glue. So you'll see here, I just kind of turned that a 1/4 turn, because while everything is relatively square, it's not 100% perfect. So it's a little bit more like a puzzle. So now that I'm happy with the way that it is looking and everything is lined up, I'm going to go ahead and start gluing down my final pieces just at the corners where they're going to be meeting the other woodwork, so to speak. And I'm just checking and making sure that it's centered. Of course, my visualness, right? I was using that little piece of wood. I was like, you know what, Corie, you got to get out the actual ruler. Just make sure everything is nice and lined up. So now I'm coming in with the third layer, and I am making sure one more time that it's going to be the way it needs to be. And then I'll come in with my glue at each of those corners again, because that's where they are lining up with the project. Get those all squared away. Got a little bit too much glue there, so I took it off on my finger and I just used it on some of the little pieces on the edges that I needed to glue. You can see right there, I'm just applying the glue there and then setting those pieces in as well. And I was just being careful not to have too much glue so that I didn't have it kind of smushing out and creating blobs. Really technical terms here that I'm using, but just wanted to make sure that it was nice and clean. And I got those last pieces put together, and that is it. She is all done, and I love her. Let me know what you think. DIY number 3. This is my inspiration. This one is $199.99, you guys, for this basket table, and we are going to recreate it for much, much less. Now, I thought I was going to start with these lids. I thought I was going to make a rectangular table. These are lids to wine crates that I had picked up at the liquor store. They were selling them, I think they were like $3 for the wine crates. And if you have followed me for a while, you know that I made a side table, a storage side table out of one of them a while back. But I have this, I don't even know what you call this. It's some sort of a fencing. It's not chicken wire, but it's kind of along those lines, but it's a little bit more heavy duty, and they're little rectangular squares. This is what I'm going to be using. And I was trying to unroll it, and I'm thinking, you know what? I think I might want to go with a round table after all, because this just wants to be curved. And the wood rounds that I have here that I'm pulling out, these I got at Home Depot. I want to say they were $12 or $14 a piece, somewhere in there. And they are also much heavier than those wood lids and a little bit more solid. So I figured, you know what? We're going to go with that. It's going to be a little bit more expensive than I started out with, but still nowhere near the $200 price tag that is out there on the inspiration piece. So I was using these to kind of help weigh it down so I could try to get it unraveled and get it to where I needed it so that I could start working with it and cutting it to the size that I needed. So once I got it unraveled, you can see I had just enough length to make it around my circles, my wood rounds. And then I went ahead and I measured off about 20 inches because I want my table to be between 20 and 24 inches tall. So with the wood rounds involved, it's going to be exactly where I want it to be. So I went ahead and cut that all the way down the length and rolled up the excess as I went, set that aside. And now I'm just cutting off the little ends that were sticking out on either side. Now, I wanted originally to have it sit on top of the wood, but I was struggling with trying to figure out how to attach it to the wood. The staple gun, I was thinking I might be able to use my staple gun to do it, but you'll see in a second, I just wasn't able to get it in there. And I was struggling with this a little bit, if I'm completely honest. But I went ahead and I thought I cut some more of this out, so I apologize that all of this is in here. But here you can see I'm trying to use my staple gun to attach it, and I realized it wasn't going to work. So I ended up putting it on the exterior of the wood round, which is fine. it just wasn't going to completely meet up. I had like about an inch gap at the back, which was also fine because I had in mind a solution for that. I needed an extra set of hands, so Rich was sweet and came over and helped hold it for me while I went ahead and punched my staples in around the edge. And I was just making sure that I was straddling with the staples, straddling some of the wire so that it was catching it. And then I went ahead and knocked the staples in all the way for any parts that were sticking out. Just knocked them in with my hammer so everything was nice and secure. Now I have my nautical rope, and I'm going to come around and just cut a length that will wrap around the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and tape that off actually. So I'm using Scotch tape to put around there, and I'm going to cut in the middle of the Scotch tape, and that'll just keep it from fraying. I'm going to go ahead and glue the two ends together and then hold that until it's cool. And once it was cool, I went ahead and I just added some glue all the way around the seam so that my rope didn't slip or anything like that. And now I'm coming in with a second layer to hide the glue and also to make sure that all of my staples are completely hidden. But this time I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to glue it as I go. Now, I wished that I had waited after to cut it until after I had done this part, because I did end up with a little bit of excess nautical rope. It wasn't a lot, it was like an inch, but I just don't like wasting stuff. And it was only because I had pulled it a little bit tighter than I had when I first measured it, because I was worried I was going to run out of rope length. So if you choose to do something like this, just do yourself a favor and wait until the end to cut it if you're gluing it as you go, like I am here. So I went ahead and finished that off. And once that was all set, I was ready to move on to tying up my seam. So I went ahead and I pulled apart some of my nautical rope and I'm gonna lace up the back, kind of like a corset. Now, I was using odds and ends, like bits and pieces of my rope, so my leftover nautical rope that I had just cut there that you saw. So I did end up with a bunch of knots, going up. It wasn't a solid piece going all the way up. I was okay with that. If you prefer to not have knots in it, because they will be visible, obviously, this is a wire mesh, table. So the inside will be visible. You might want to just start with some fresh nautical rope, and I would recommend using the 11-foot length on that. But I had just unraveled it, so I had the 3 strands, and I'm going in and out of the little squares on either side to just pull it all together. And when I did have knots, I just pushed them to the inside so they weren't visible from the outside. The other thing I was doing was, as I was weaving this, I would put it through both sides of the seam, and then I would actually tie the first part of a knot, right? So when you tie your shoes, you kind of do that first half of a knot. I was doing that each time, which also used up a lot of the rope. So depending on how you choose to close up your seam, you may not need as much rope as what I was using here. So once I got it all seamed up, you can see my knots there. I decided to come in with a little hot glue just to secure them a little bit more, just to make sure that they weren't going to come undone. And then I went ahead and I trimmed off some of that a little bit more so that it was just a little bit neater. And then I went back in with a little bit more hot glue where I thought it might need it. Now along the top, because I had gone on the outside of the wood round, I need to make sure that my lid isn't going to fall in. So I am just tying another length of rope to the inside, and that's also helping with the top not to be like pointy or anything. So now I am working on my lid, and I need to cut holes in my lid so that my little handles will be able to come through, so we'll be able to pick it up and carry it around without taking the lid off. And so I'm just trying to identify where I want to have those little holes, And I'm going to be drilling them about an inch in from the edge, and I'm doing my best to make sure that my two handles are going to be lined up across from one another. So once I had those marked, I went ahead and put it on a piece of wood because I didn't want to be right on my craft table. I don't want to mess up my craft table and drill through this the way I've been known to do in the past. So I actually ended up putting another piece of wood underneath just in case. I was having so much trouble with this. I thought these wood rounds were pine. I don't know, maybe they're not. And I always thought a pine is soft. My drill bit kept getting stuck. This wood seemed a lot harder than what I was expecting. So I pulled out my Dremel and I was trying to figure out what bit to use. I don't think I had the proper one. You guys, I'm telling you right now, this is not the way to do this. I was not doing this the proper way. So I don't know what the proper tool would have been. Maybe one of you guys could tell me, but I was using what I think might have been an engraving bit, and then right now I'm using my sander bit. Now, it all worked out in the end because I am determined, and I was going to find a way or make a way, but once I had it all set with my handles, I was ready to go ahead and figure out where to put or the holes. I was ready to figure out where to put my handles. So I wove in some more nautical rope through the wire, so you can see it there kind of going in and out. I just did it the next row down below where I tied on the edging, if you will. I went ahead and taped that off and cut it. And now I'm just making sure my knot is flush up against the side of the inside of the basket so that it's as hidden as possible. And then I went ahead and I did the same thing on the other side. And once I had that all tied off and ready to go, I was able to go ahead and cut that. And then we were ready to put on our lid. And so those little handles come right up through the holes in the lid and it's all set. But I did decide that I wanted to put it on a Lazy Susan mechanism. I just wanted to make sure that, first of all, the wire at the bottom wasn't going to scratch up my floor, but then I also thought it might be fun to have it swivel. So I went ahead and flipped it upside down and attached that with some hot glue and some wood glue. And then it was all done. There's my Gorilla Wood Glue and my hot glue, and that's what I used. And here it is. Let me know what you think. And now it's time for a shout out timeout. Beautiful Rose, these are all so sweet. I'm so excited to be still sharing Christmas stuff with you guys. Cute Mary S, these are beautiful. I love the llama. And amazing Mary C, these dolls, she made these all by hand. And pretty Valerie, such sweet projects from everybody. Sweet Charlene, thank you so much for sharing with me. If you're interested in a shout out, I would love to give you one. Just send me an email at craftedbycorie@gmail.com. DIY number 4. All right, this is inspiration picture number 4. So I am using this little box tray thing from the Dollar Tree, but my subscriber Rose had sent it to me. I also have some Dollar Tree twine. I'm using my Dollar Tree screwdriver to remove the embellishment off the little tray. And I have those little glass Dollar Tree containers. I'm not really sure what they are normally used for, but we're using them for this project. So I went ahead and sanded those little holes, and the sawdust pretty much filled in those holes. You could certainly use wood filler. I did not bother. I figured it was going to be on the bottom. But I want to preserve the inside of the box. I could have popped out the back, which would have been more in line with the inspiration picture, but I chose not to because I kind of liked the wood grain there. In hindsight, it ended up being a little bit dark on the inside, so If I had to do it again, I might go ahead and pop that out. But for right now, I was just putting parchment paper down inside of there to protect it because I did not want it to be painted black. So painting the rest of it black, and then that parchment paper just protected it. So I didn't have to tape, because I find taping to be a little bit tedious sometimes. So I am just using my heat gun, and I am helping that to dry, and you can see the parchment paper worked just fine. Now I'm measuring it to figure out where I want to put my little holes for my little hanging bud vases, and marking that off and making sure everything is centered. I forgot that I was going to want to section this off, so when I drilled these holes, I didn't account for the sections, and so I really should have spread my holes out a little bit more than I did. My left and right hole were a little bit too close to the middle, even though they were actually all equidistance apart, but it's because of those sections that I ended up putting in. But I think you'll see what I mean. It's still super cute, but I went ahead and got my twine all set and wrapped it around. At first I had tied it from the end, and then I realized I needed to tie it from the middle of my twine so that I had both lengths of twine coming up through the middle. And now I'm using a needle threader, actually from my sewing kit, to help me get my twine up through the little holes that I drilled. So just pulling the twine up and through and making sure everything is at the right length, and then I'll go ahead and tie those knots, and just making sure that I adjust as needed, so that everything is going to hang at the same height. And then I went ahead and trimmed everything off once I had it where I wanted it. And for my dividers, I am using black foam core board, and just trimming that to size using my little Arteza self-healing mat to get that all trimmed up, and then I can slide that right in. It was nice and tight because I did a good job with my measurements. I'll come clean and tell you that was the second time I did it. The first time they weren't quite long enough, but we made it happen. So here I'm coming in with just a little bit of black chalk paint for the edges, and it's all done. Let me know what you think.
Okay, everybody, that's it for today. I hope that you enjoyed the project. Just a reminder to please give me a big thumbs up. Leave me a comment and let me know which one you liked the most. It really does help YouTube to recognize my videos and helps me to grow. Thank you so much, as always, for being here. Until the next time, be well, be kind, and make it a great day. Thank you again so much for watching. Take good care. Bye.